Welcome to the first Student Cultural Programming Fee, oops, um, training for, it's not a training, it's a presentation for prospective applicants. Uh, Today, what I want to make sure we are covering is the purpose and mission of the SCPF, the Student Cultural Programming Fee, some of the basics for what we're looking for in cultural programming, ways that you could go about applying to SCPF, and what meetings look like and how we go about making decisions. Finally, we talk briefly about what it means to complete an SCPF report. And if there's still any outlying questions, we're happy to answer them. I want to give you a brief welcome. I'm Shauna Patterson Stevens, she, her, hers, and I work really closely with the cultural centers within student affairs. Someone else that's on the call is Joshua Williams. He also works within student affairs and works very closely with the SCPF as one of the staff advisors. So I'm actually grateful that you're on the call, Josh, because if there are really targeted budgetary questions that you might have, I'm sure, Josh, you don't mind jumping in. So.
No, yeah, thanks, Shauna.
Okay, so quickly, the purpose and mission of SCPF. The SCPF offers financial and educational support for culturally significant programming and initiatives coordinated by students, faculty, and staff on campus. The purpose of SCPF is to advance cultural awareness and social justice education and to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout campus. Events must be free and open to the entire public, just to ensure that they're equitably dispersed and attainable for all members writ large across campus. The purpose is to make sure that we're offering financial and educational support for culturally significant programming, as well as initiatives that are coordinated by student, faculty, and staff on campus. So when folks are wondering, can I apply for SCPF funding? As long as you're thinking about the educational impact of culturally significant programming and you're a student, your faculty, or staff member affiliated with the institution, you can apply. Advance cultural awareness, social justice education, and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout campus. And within that framework, some of the things that we're thinking about when we talk about minoritized population or marginalized populations, we're thinking about supporting the socio-historical context of what it means to be minoritized in the US. We are also including global understandings of what it means to be minoritized at this point. I know before there were some concerns about whether or not we were addressing international needs as well. And so this includes underserved populations, such as diverse folks with diverse abilities, folks with documentation status, or questions around documentation status, ethnicity, gender, indigeneity, nationality, or global positionality, race, religious identity, secular identity, and tribal citizenship and affiliation. So I think it's sometimes there are moments where folks are wondering, well, I have an identity, and I want to make sure that my identity is represented. I think that that's very important to ensure that that's happening. But within the scope of SCPF in particular, we're talking about marginalized and minoritized identities within this scope. And so if there is, for example, someone of a majority-based identity who's interested in seeking funding for a program or initiative, there are other avenues that they can take advantage of. This one just speaks specifically to marginalized identities on this campus. Again, just to reiterate, any student organization, university program, department affiliated with the University of Illinois may apply for SCPF funding. I have included some abbreviated guidelines. A longer list of guidelines are available on our website at scpf.illinois.edu. I believe that's the correct website, but I thought it would be really important just to highlight some of the very primary guidelines that we have established for this funding source. Programs or events must be free to the University of Illinois students, faculty, and staff, and must be presented within the academic year of application. Requests for professional entertainers more than $5,000 must be co-sponsored by State Farm Center, Cranert, Star Course Illini Union, or the Illini Union Board. Requests for exception must be made to the coordinating committee on entertainment events. So it's not that we won't necessarily consider it. It's just that if you are seeking to request funding from SCPF for more than $5,000 for an entertainer, and you're looking to do that as a solo entity, there's a process for going about requesting those funds in that way. Speaker fees, artistic, professional, contractual services, payments made through UIUC campus units or student organizations must work directly with the RSO office, not by individual students. So basically what the statement is saying here is that if we are offering you funding, we will be reimbursing the unit by which you are representing. We will not make payments directly to students. A contract or letter of agreement must be signed by the payee and the organization department being reimbursed for services. Speaker fees and lecture fee payments must be for an individual, only those listed on the original application, no more than $5,000, and for participation in an activity for which that individual does not normally require a fee or perform to make a living. So an example would be if you have a faculty member serving on a panel, we would not necessarily consider that a service, especially if that faculty member worked within the University of Illinois. Same for if that person was giving a presentation over a lunch, we wouldn't necessarily fund those kinds of requests. Payments for speaker fees, artistic, professional, contractual services must be made directly by a sponsoring your university department or by an RSO through their RSO account. Contracts or letters of agreement must be arranged, signed, and approved by the RSO office or by a sponsoring university department before the event occurs. SCPF cannot process contracts and will only provide reimbursement to an RSO account or department account after these documents are submitted. Please be aware that any entity that does business with the university is required to have adequate insurance coverage to protect both the vendor and the university in the event of a liability claim. SCPF funds may not be used to pay any vendor not in compliance with these policies. And please make sure you review campus risk management for further details. And we have the link again on our website. Requests made for more than $3,000 also require unanimous approval of all voting members present. Those would be, or voting members represent the student advisory on the SCPF advisory committee. And so again, all of the voting members present in those allocation meetings, and we'll get to that, must vote in the unanimous or in the positive if any application goes over $3,000. Applications for funding will be considered only for future events. Any events that have occurred prior to allocation meetings will not be reviewed by the SCPF funding board. And finally, no more than 80% of the program's budget will be funded. I just thought it was really important to outline that because I know there are some questions around provisions for SCPF, and I thought that it would be helpful if we highlighted what's available and what's not. Just to be clear, SCPF won't fund projects, activities, or services found in violation of state law and or university rules, regulations, policies, and procedures or activities, strictly social events or dances. Gifts of any form of recognition and or giveaway items, food unless integral and culturally significant to the program, events that are proselytizing in nature, closed events, expenses to attend conferences, travel for UIUC students, faculty, and staff, postage, publications, printing that are not also included in English. Again, that's really just related to ensuring that all members of the university can access the information that is funded through SCPF, and political endorsements. We also will not fund expenses related to fundraisers, equipment purchases, wages or salaries, events held off campus beyond 10 miles of the Turner Student Services Building, alcoholic beverages, and then we get very, very particular about this, or any activity or communication which incorporates a reference to alcoholic beverages, or promotes or is supported by an alcoholic beverage manufacturer, distributor, sales organization, or vendor. Payments to members of a campus organization for services rendered to that organization, honoraria and or salary or services uh, made by or payments to university faculty, staff, and or students, purchase of any book, video, or DVD that is available at the Urbana campus undergraduate library. So I hope that streamlines or helps to situate your understanding of what we do and don't support. And then we thought it was really important to talk about specifically what cultural programming means for the SCPF. So you may have taken advantage in the past of either programming for yourself as a faculty, staff, or student with regard to cultural programming on campus, or maybe taking advantage of going to some of these beautiful events that take place on campus. So some of you, I'm pretty sure, are very aware of what it means, but just to reiterate, initiatives emphasizing the support of minoritized and traditionally underserved communities includes diverse abilities, documentation status, ethnicity, gender, indigeneity, nationality, race, religious identity, secular identity, tribal citizenship, and affiliation. And what is new this year for SCPF is rather than specifically tailoring an initiative around a racial identity or nationality, we are thinking a little more broadly about within the context of underserved or underrepresented identity, some of the things that we're exploring, some of the themes that we are exploring with these events and with these programs. So I'm going to go over briefly some of the themes that you will utilize or select when you're applying for SCPF funding, and having a better sense of where you would articulate or I think frame the program that you're hoping to sponsor. This year, you'll be looking at your program through the lens of context and foundations, social and emotional well-being, training and development, celebration and recognition, advocacy and outreach. And the next few slides just go a bit more into detail about what those things are. Again, it's outlined in the application, it's outlined online, so I'm not going to take too much time reading the definitions, but I'll give some brief examples of what could fall within each category. So context and foundations, really what we're talking about here is an understanding that what happened in the past and what shapes our environment around us does then necessitate our experiences in contemporary context. And so there are a lot of different types of events and programs that have to do with context and foundations. This could be research, it could be scholarship, it could be one that touches on sociological issues, philosophical issues, politics. This might be a program that is a debate. It might be a program that is talking about identity that talks about identity and connects contemporary issues with what's happened in the past. Those sorts of programs would fall within the purview of context and foundations. Social and emotional well-being. So there's an understanding that oftentimes minoritized individuals that are on this campus might be combating feelings of isolation, might be needing some respite from the broader campus community, might also be feeling somewhat excluded, and they could use a little boost in feeling like they belong on campus. So anything that kind of offsets those negative feelings and issues and emotions could fall within this category. Oftentimes you might see community building activities or events, maybe opportunities to build connections across difference. Sometimes you might see programs that are talking about wellness very specifically and squarely on the nose, right? And thinking about, what does it mean to be a person of color attending a predominantly white institution and combating depression. So issues like that and initiatives meant to offset those kinds of feelings or emotion, or programs that are meant to ensure that community is built and people feel connected to the institution would fall within this purview. Training and development. This is a very big topic on our campus, I've noticed, but oftentimes we don't necessarily explicitly say what we mean by training and development. So anything that falls within the scope of a workshop, a lunch and lecture series, a moment where you're inviting faculty panelists to talk about an issue that's occurring in the classroom, thinking about methods and how we could think differently about including marginalized and minoritized voices in research and scholarship. This would be a great place to land your research, to land your program if you're thinking about those kinds of topics and items. You could think about framing your program as a training and development piece. Celebration and recognition. So this is, I think, a label that folks are most familiar with because, you know, you'll see Heritage Month events, you'll see celebrations around holiday or customs. Anything that is meant to be celebratory or recognizing culture would fall within the category of celebration and recognition. So I think this is something that is a little more accessible to most folks, but I thought it would be also helpful to squarely situate those items within this category. Another piece is advocacy and outreach. So I think I see a lot of student groups in particular thinking about ways that they could create reciprocal relationships between themselves and the institution. Advocacy and outreach would be a great place for that. If you're trying to reimagine what activism could look like, if you're trying to even train each other or students or faculty and staff on how to be strong activists and what it entails. I'm thinking about civic engagement, civic engagement and what it means to not just be a volunteer, but an active participant, a global citizen, and giving back. Advocacy and outreach would be a great place for that kind of program. So when you apply for SCPF funding, it's all online. We're still updating our website, so excuse me if there are some things that aren't necessarily accurate here, but I do know that by the end of the week, everything that we're talking about today will be reflected on the website. If you haven't already visited, you can go to oiir.illinois.edu/about/SCPF-funding. And that's where you'll find all of the material that I just read off to you. This is also where you can go to apply for applications. So if you see on the left-hand side of the screen, I've circled applications and deadlines. You can go there not only to apply, but also to see a listing of when we'll accept applications and when our allocation meetings are. So we meet every 2 weeks, basically. And we want to make sure that we're keeping a consistent flow of applications going. So we have dates with corresponding allocation meetings scheduled. And so if you go to that link on the side, the tab that says application and deadlines, and then you scroll down a bit, you'll see here the application deadline and the corresponding allocation meeting time as well. So for an example, I listed here some upcoming deadlines. We have another round of applications accepted through October 14th by 5 p.m. And then the corresponding allocation meeting that is scheduled with that application deadline will be October 28th at 5:15 p.m. We try to keep those meetings on 15-minute increments. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. Applying. So the application is also available again on the application and deadlines link. If you just click 2020-2021 online application form, it'll take you straight to the online application process. What you'll want here is all of the information that you could possibly think to include in your program and be able to consolidate it into this online application. If you scroll through there at some point, you'll see all the mandatory questions such as, have you received funding for this event from SCPF before? Do you have co-sponsors? Are you working with others? Have you received funding from other sources that are supporting this particular project? I think what's also really important is to having a full-scale understanding of the expenses that will be connected with making sure that your program is successful. So are you thinking about advertising? Where are you advertising? How much is it going to cost? Are you thinking about additional supplies associated or affiliated with ensuring that this program will be successful? If you're offering food options, thinking about like why this particular type of food item, where will you go to acquire it? How much will it be? Have all of those things in mind already available to you, just so you don't have to find yourself sifting around for answers as you sit down to complete the application. Um, Near the end, we also include a box to further emphasize or provide information on particular objects or materials that you'll be using. So please make sure that to the best of your ability, you're offering as much information as possible. I think the more information we have on the front end, the easier it is for everyone on the back end. And I'll talk again about the allocation meeting. But the more complete and as well as succinct um, application you are able to submit, I think the easier it is for the student advisory members to parse out details that will help them to make a determination for how they go about funding this opportunity or I'll say opportunity for students on this campus. Something to note, we pay 80% of the cost associated with a program. So you still might want to consider where you might need to receive the other 20% of the offerings for that event, unless you have a budget with your office or your student organization already available to you. Again, offering any pertinent information near the close of the application will make this application, I think, a successful submission. So once you've applied for funding, it goes through an online process where the student advisory will review your application, and one of three things can happen. So you've submitted the application and it looks great and it's been completed in a way that makes sense. Maybe it's a project that happens every year. We're very familiar with it. We know the ins and outs of it. We will make sure that your application goes through to the decision-making process without any additional prompting or requests to include you in allocation meetings. Second, the SCPF Student Advisory reviews your application, and they only have one or two questions, and those questions can be answered via email. We will send you the questions via email and give you a timeline to respond to those questions. And then after that, the SCPF Student Advisory will make a decision based upon the information they receive via email. Third, the SCPF Student Advisory reviews your application, and they might have a range of questions, and they just want to make sure they have a firm understanding of what your approach might be. And it might in this point or this moment be easier if we just met with you. And so that's where we'll include you in the student allocation meetings with the student advisory board. And for about 15 minutes, we'll just go over the questions that we email to you via email, where you will be invited to provide your response, quote unquote, in person. I'm saying quote unquote in person because right now, of course, we're virtual, but traditionally we are in person when we have these meetings. The SCPF allocation meetings, again, are outlined on the SCPF website. I think it's just best practice if you know that you submitted an application to go ahead and just block out that Wednesday at 5:15 to about 8:15 time slot, because it may be a moment where you are just submitting answers online or not at all because your application made complete sense to us and we didn't have questions, and or you might be asked to come into an allocation meeting, and we just want to make sure that folks are aware well ahead of time to be mindful that they might be included or invited into that allocation meeting. I would come prepared to answer the questions that are listed in the SCPF email. And I think also it's important to think about the fact that while the applications are reviewed by two student advisory members, and generally those will be the folks that will be asking questions in the allocation meeting, there might be a moment where other student advisory members have additional questions that they want to ask based on some of the additional information you shared. So usually it takes about 15 minutes to go through that process. And again, it's just an information finding experience. It's really just to help us be as informed as possible when we're making financial decisions. We're trying to be good stewards of this money, and um, being able to submit a full detailed report on how we go about allocating funds is just in the best interest of ensuring that this funding uh, venue continues to exist. Finally, you'll receive an email about 5 business days after your allocation meeting. Um, we're still working out a few kinks, but we're rolling now. So I can say with conviction that moving forward, this is definitely going to be a process that you can rely on. So we definitely appreciated your patience as we've been moving through some of these changes. But moving forward after allocation meeting, if you did attend, if you didn't attend, our final decision will be emailed to all applicants for that particular time frame within 5 business days. In order to receive the approved funding from SCPF, both the final report and the funding disbursement form should be submitted to SCPF at illinois.edu no later than 30 days after the last day of your event. And we say after the last day because sometimes it's a series, it's a symposia, it lasts a few days. You don't have to worry about Monday if it went from Monday to Friday, but 30 days after Friday, that those final reports should be submitted to SCPF at illinois.edu. Those forms are available on the website as well. And we just ask that you maybe take a good look at it, maybe even before your event takes place, to ensure that not only were all the expenditures up to code with what we agreed upon, but also that you're prepared to talk about those expenditures after the conclusion of your event. SCPF decisions can be appealed, and we just want to make sure you're clear on that process as well. In order to appeal, you'll make sure you email scpf at illinois.edu with the following information. In the subject line, you'll write request for appeal. You'll include your hearing date and the application number that you submitted as your subject. And in the body of the email, you'll include the name of the applicant, the application number, University of Illinois affiliation, name of organization, phone, email, funding period of the original request, description of the original request, and a brief description as to why you feel an appeal is sought. Just for full disclosure, I'm one of the staff advisors as well. I'll collect all of this information and I'll make sure that the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs receives it. And that's as far as I'm involved in that process. But it is a very neutral process with someone who's not directly involved or tied with SCPF, who makes the final determination as to whether an appeal will be received and attained or struck down.